Good morning, my dear brothers and sisters. How are you today? Good. So we greet each other good morning. We smile or wave at each other. Recognize your seatmates. It's very edifying that many families come to Mass, but it is also equally edifying when just an individual who is also a young adult would come to Mass even by himself or herself. That is a testament to one's commitment to the Mass. So that even if parents don't supervise them or force them, they still come to Mass. But for those individuals who come by themselves, it is important that we greet them or say hello to them and welcome them and affirm them. Finally, we are back in full swing in the season of green called Ordinary Time. As you know, with about 3 weeks ago on Monday after Pentecost, we entered into Ordinary Time. That's why we wear the color green. But the 2 Sundays after that, we have had a couple of great solemnities which we celebrated: the solemnity of the Trinity and the solemnity of the Corpus Christi, or the body and blood of Christ. So we haven't really come back to Ordinary Time on a Sunday until today, when we start with the 10th Sunday in Ordinary Time. And as I've told you before, Ordinary Time is a season where we read and reflect on the public ministry of Jesus, His teachings, His preachings, His many miracle stories, including His expulsion of the evil or exorcism. And what a place to come back to Ordinary Time, because it seems like everyone is upset with Him. We are only on chapter 3 of Mark's Gospel, which means just the beginning of Mark's Gospel, and we already find everybody seemingly upset with Jesus. The Gospel says Jesus came home, which means Nazareth, his hometown. And when his relatives heard of this, they set out to seize him because they said he is out of his mind. There is a little bit of difficulty in translating this sentence in the Gospel. Who were upset in Jesus, and why were they upset? The Revised Standard Version translates this sentence as, when Jesus' friends heard of this, they went out to seize him because he was beside himself. But the New American Bible translates this sentence as, when Jesus' relatives heard of this, they went out to seize him because they thought he was out of his mind. Nonetheless, the original Greek is oi par autou, which literally translated as those who belong to him. It could be his relatives, or it could be some of his friends, but for sure, those people from within his hometown of Nazareth who are someone or somehow belonging to him or part of his life. And they all seem to think that something is amiss. Either he is beside himself, or more strongly, as the New American Bible puts it, he is out of his mind. There are 4 possible reasons why they thought of him to be so. First, Jesus had abandoned his safe and secure job as a much-needed village carpenter with steady income in order to become a wandering preacher with no residence or steady income. Second, Jesus had chosen a band of disciples, fishermen, many of them, with no political or social influence, which also included a hated tax collector and a fanatic zealot as part of his group of disciples. Third, Jesus had begun criticizing the power lobby, the scribes and the Pharisees, even labeling them as hypocrites in their own religious headquarters. And this was considered to be so risky for he could be arrested and be persecuted by the same powerful people. And fourthly, Jesus had at this point silently claimed himself to be the long-awaited Messiah, which was considered to be blasphemous. But not only those who were part of his life were upset with him, the religious leaders, scribes and Pharisees, were also upset with him. And so upset were they that they accused him of being possessed by Beelzebul and expelling demons by the power of the prince of demons, Beelzebul. Beelzebul is an Aramaic term, which means the Lord of the flies. Beel, meaning from the root word Baal, which means Lord. Beelzebul, Lord of the flies, the customary name for Satan. If you think about, say, Satan as the prince of death, and death is associated with decay, Lord of Flies seems to be almost automatic name for the prince of demons. But Jesus responds to this accusation by saying, well, how can Satan drive out Satan? Which means that if your accusation is true, that I'm casting out demons by the name of the prince of demons, then that means Satan is casting out himself. And that logic does not work. No one fights against oneself. In the same way that no kingdom would fight against itself. It is not going to last. It will fall apart. So, no, that logic does not work. It does not make sense. But what do we see here? Obviously, we see here a people whose hearts and minds are already set with their own misconceptions, that no information can get into them to change how they were thinking and what they were thinking. No good act, no miracle, no word of hope, no word of truth can get into them that can change what they were thinking. They have already come to a conclusion and to a judgment about who Jesus is and what he is doing, and nothing can ever change that. They are so close-minded and so blind that they have already identified Jesus as their enemy, and that there's nothing good that he can possibly do in order to change that. You know, it is very easy to, from our point of view, to criticize the scribes and the Pharisees for their closed-mindedness, not realizing that sometimes, unfortunately, we see that same mindset at work even in our world today. It is so easy for people to come up with a conclusion and judgment about someone without really knowing them. Those preconceived judgments, those stereotypes, they prevent us from seeing the good in one another. They prevent us from recognizing the truth that God can work through even the most unlikely of people, even in the most unlikely circumstances. Saint Mother Teresa says, you know, if you are busy criticizing others, you will have no time to love them. If your heart is so full of preconceived judgments on people, you will have no spot for them to love them. That is why the old dictum says, never ever judge a book by its cover. And as one comedian in the Philippines says, don't judge my brother, he is not a book. And for those who face rejections or being prejudged because of their appearance and color and race and nationality and whatnot, face rejections with prophetic courage and even of optimism, just as Jesus did in the gospel today. And just as the many brilliant people up and down our century did. The likes of the brilliant G.K. Chesterton, a theologian who, when he could not read until he was 8 years old, a teacher said if his head were opened, they would probably find a lump of fat where there was supposed to be a brain. That teacher was obviously eventually proven wrong. Or the likes of Albert Einstein, whose parents were informed by a teacher that he would never amount to anything. Or Beatrix Potter, whose The Tale of Peter Rabbit got rejected by 7 publishers. Or Richard Bach, who got 20 rejection slips before Jonathan Livingstone Seagull was published. Or Dr. Seuss, who got more than 24 rejection slips until finally his work, The Cat in the Hat, made it to print, making him one of the most popular children authors of all time. So, rejections born out of preconceived judgments are unfortunately part of our human experiences. Even the earthly ministry of Jesus was not spared from it. Yes, they hurt, and yes, they caused so much pain. But just as Jesus faced rejection heroically, prophetically, and courageously, we also can. And once we do, we will be wise to live with it, and will be wise to understand the meaning of the words in the Beatitudes. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. Amen.